What y'all listening to?
Limelight Highlight Podcast.
And welcome back to the show, your silver lining space to take a break from the stressful everyday. I know we missed last week, but I wasn't having any of my creative juices flowing and couldn't really find the motivation to get an episode done. But in other words, I have been keeping up with reading, and for the first time I've been pretty preoccupied with reading 2 books. For a while, I didn't think reading more than 1 book at a time was really effective, but if I could watch multiple shows that I'm tuning in for, as well as listening to multiple podcasts, why not read more than 1 book at a time? And I'm almost done with one, and I'm really enjoying the other, and my wife actually got me another book that I'm really excited to read after that. I'm not going to do 3 books at a time because that would be counterproductive, but most of what I read is about self-improvement. And if there's anything that I've learned about reading those types of books, it's really not anything that was never said before. But if you stay engaged and continue to read those types of books, you kind of change your state of mind and definitely end up moving into a better position and improving yourself, if you're willing to put in the work, of course. And in addition to reading, I've been jumping rope almost every day. My calves and feet have been kind of killing me, and if you get a chance to look up the benefits of jumping rope, you'll be pretty surprised at what you might find. I'm sharing this information with you because it's really just easy to get sidetracked in life and put your mental and physical health to the side. And regardless of your situation, if you find you're kind of already, especially with the new year going in, you happen to already be falling off those New Year resolutions boat. As long as you keep making a conscious effort to improve yourself, even in the slightest, I think you'll end the year 10 times better than when you started. Now, for upcoming events, it's all about The Block Gives Back, and this week is the last week of January and the last Tuesday of the month. So if you happen to be in Philly, join The Block Gives Back on Tuesday the 28th, as they will be preparing taco bowls for 100 people in need, Taco Tuesday. They'll be preparing the food at Moss Playground at 5700 Torresdale Ave at 5:15 p.m., then setting up shop at 16th and JFK in Center City at 7:15. So try your hardest to volunteer, and if you can't make it, at least visit their website or their social media pages to donate and get a good deed in before the month is over. And if you fail to do both of those things, keep an eye out for their 4 Blocks in 4 Weeks event coming up in April. More information to come when that date gets closer, but let's get started with today's show. Now, I remember seeing this picture online that is now burned into my memory. It went something like, instead of asking kids what they want when they grow up, what they want to be when they grow up. You always ask a kid what they want to be. They want to be a police officer, a fireman, an astronaut, a doctor, all those important jobs, which is really cool. Good way to have kids to have ambition that way. But instead of asking them what they want to be when they grow up, ask them what problem do they want to solve when they grow up. The gist of the picture, or the meme, was just saying how we need to change the way our younger generation thinks. In an age where the almighty dollar is worshipped and idolized as the only thing that really matters, we tend to stray from the things that actually matter. And as different as we all think, I think it's safe to say that we can all agree that there's one thing that's more valuable than money, and that's time. The older I get, the more I realize the more happy and stress-free I am, the better my overall health is, and the more I can do positive and productive things with my time. A lot of people think I just need to get paid more, or I need to make more an hour, when in reality, as great as that paycheck might be, having time to do the things you really want to do turn out to be way more valuable than a check. I know I'm rambling, but let me get back to the whole what problem do you want to solve when you get older idea. So this story that we're going to talk about is about 2 high school students who took that train of thought and put it to use. But before we get into that, I want to share a couple stats with you. In 2018, a statistical 552,830 people were counted as homeless in the U.S. And that's not including those who aren't documented or those who are living in the country legally. A lot of these numbers can get skewed, but let's just say that's a low number in the sense of the stats that they got. So I think it's safe to say an egregious number of people in one of the richest countries on the planet are homeless. People end up homeless for numerous reasons, some because of poor psychological health, some because of drug addiction, some due to domestic abuse or an unstable home. Recently, I found out that 57.1% of U.S. personal bankruptcies are actually due to medical bills. I'll let you use your imagination on how many of those people are homeless because they couldn't get their bills paid, but you can't really stop yourself from getting sick. For some people anyway, which is another reason why I keep saying we need free healthcare, but that's a conversation for another time. Needless to say, there are way too many homeless people out in the street, and not justifiably so. Even with all the organizations out there to help provide shelter, they still have to turn people away simply because of limited resources, causing people to remain on the streets and without shelter. I know we talked about that before in a previous podcasts. And now that we have our problem, I kind of want to rewind and finally get into the positive news that these two high school students provided. These students go to MacDonald High School in Canada. And while Canada has its own problems with homelessness, their population isn't as big as America's. I just want to have you keep that in mind. Adriana Vutrano and Pasha Jones partnered up for their school science fair. Students had to come up with an idea and present it. And the two students knew from the gate that they wanted to do something that would help homeless people. And if you know anything about Canada, it's significantly colder than most of the states south of their border. And you mix that in with the amount of homeless people on the streets, the cold and not having shelter can be a pretty dangerous pair. So the 15-year-olds wanted to come up with something that would keep people who are living on the streets warm during the winter and somewhat cool during the summer's heat waves, because they have seasons just like we do. And some people sometimes choose to sleep on the streets, even if there are shelters around due to their mental state, or some people just don't want to be in those shelters. It's not the safest place to be either. Sometimes the street is safer, which is also sad. But the two students built a backpack that weighs less than 5 pounds and can transform into a shelter, which they call a portable house. It's not that big, but they got innovative and they purchased their materials at local hardware stores, including tarp and hula hoops. They described it as an accordion that contracts and expands to a length up to around 6 feet. The shelter is lined with a space blanket, which keeps it warm during the cold months, and it ranges from 6 to 7 degrees warmer inside, which is, I would say, pretty significant for something that these 15-year-old kids came up with. During the hot months, the user can flip it upside down so that the space blanket is on top, and the sun will reflect off the space blanket, making it cooler inside, kind of just like those window shades you put in your car. So the two went out in the streets of Montreal and stayed in the self-made shelters all day and claimed it was super comfortable. And when they presented it at their science fair, the judges were all pretty impressed. It was such a hit at that science fair that the students took their innovation to New Brunswick and showed it off at the Canada-wide science fair. And the pair are now looking for partners to mass produce their prototype. They estimate that it would cost around $10 to make each one of these materials, that is, as long as the materials are bought in bulk. And they also hope that one day they'll be able to see homeless people using their invention on the streets. So this story is a perfect example of kids finding a problem and coming up with a solution. Pasha Jones was quoted saying, "My uncle actually died on the streets due to mental illness. He became homeless and started living on the streets," which brings me back to a point that I've made before on the show, which is sometimes we don't either care enough or we don't make that big a difference because it doesn't affect us directly. But you have people who are affected directly that bring up these things and are solutions that they want to fix or solve or try to help, and it blows up sometimes in a positive way. But when something like this happens, the mind has a way of coming up with solutions to make sure that it either won't happen again or at least make life a little more comfortable for those who do have to deal with these certain tragic events in their lives. This specific article reminded me of something I've seen a few years back as well before I started the podcast. And I had to kind of Google it and look it up myself. And it's a website called empowermentplan.org. And they created a weather-resistant coat that can transform into a sleeping bag or be worn as an over-the-shoulder bag. And it's another great idea for those who find themselves without shelter sleeping on the streets. The company actually started in Detroit by a woman named Veronica Scott, who grew up firsthand in an unstable childhood, stuck in poverty. Once again, showing that if it affects you directly, most likely people will do something about it. She designed a coat that could turn into a sleeping bag, and not only for individuals in need, but also with them. She realized that not only could she supply these people with sleeping systems, a warm sleeping system, but she could also act as an employer working with them. The coat could the project that she started with the coat turning into a sleeping system, she ended up turning her project into a business, and she started to employ the same people who she was helping in need. With her company, she's created over 80 jobs. She's impacted 250 children and has been able to distribute 35,000 coats, which is a pretty big deal for one person. The best part of people doing something to help out others is that it's contagious, and people feel the need to pay it forward. So she's gotten so big that since 2016, the NFL Detroit Lions have proudly partnered with the Empowerment Plan, and to join the Lions, 23 other big names and big name companies have actually helped with many other loyal donors. So like General Motors, Ford, all that stuff in Detroit, kind of, the big industrial movement, a lot of those places and even some banks kind of help donate money. I mean, one idea can make such a difference if you're willing to put the work in, and none of these things are really easy to do, but I promise they probably feel a whole lot more successful, and a sense of achievement comes to mind than a big paycheck could ever do, like we were talking about before. I know money can always keep you more comfortable. You can buy things, but after a while, I mean, material objects are just that, material objects. You can only do so much. But having a feeling of accomplishment, being a part of something that's really impacting people's lives in a positive way, makes a huge difference. I mean, just imagine those two 15-year-old high school students coming up with a simple yet effective idea and making it work. Imagine that paired up with this sleeping bag coat. Like, these people can really sleep comfortably on the streets. Unfortunately, that's where they're at right now. You can't. It's a problem that you can't completely fix, but you can make better. And these people are just trying to make the best out of a crappy situation. These are the type of things and people that need to be highlighted. There's so much potential out there to truly give everyone a comfortable life, and we just need to equip our youth with a better understanding that money isn't everything. A community is true power, as hippy dippy as that might sound. I hope this episode has been an example to one person that one person can truly make a difference. And I hope that it gave you something to think about next time you see a homeless person, or even have a conversation with your child or a younger person in your life. Ask them what problems they want to solve instead of what they want to be, and get their minds thinking a little different for our future. I kind of imagine that train of thought instead of what do you want to be when you grow up? Because everybody wants to be something famous, something that makes a lot of money, because that's kind of what we're taught. But if you say what problem you want to solve, the first thing a kid thinks is, I don't know, what problems are there? And the minute there's a ton of problems out there. But you show them something that is problematic, yet that there is a solution. You just gotta have a creative way of coming up with it. I think you get people like these 15-year-olds or that girl who created the coat. So it's those things. I don't really have any listener news today, but be sure to check out the show notes for all the links in the information for today's show. And if you'd like to share a feel-good positive story or contribute to the podcast by sharing some good and useful information, or even just to give us some feedback on